Welcome along to this class, those online and those who are present in the room. As you can see, we're doing a class on presenting the path, and this will be the second of those classes today. So we will begin as we normally do by taking refuge in generating a mind of enlightenment. And to prepare ourselves for that, we will sit relaxed in our seats and get ourselves comfortable, and then we'll engage in these different practices. So the prayers and so forth will come up on the screen. If your eyes are closed at that time and you wish to open them to recite them, please do. Otherwise, just stay in your meditative space. So get comfortable and in your seat. Just try to make sure that your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. And let the body breathe itself. And as the body breathes itself, become aware of the movements that take place and the feelings that arise in response to the breath. The mind wanders, just gently bring it back, place it anywhere upon the body, and once again become aware of the movements and feelings that are taking place as the body breathes itself. And feeling at ease and being present, it's easy to imagine the presence of Shakyamuni Buddha, his entourage of bodhisattvas, your spiritual guides and the protectors arising in front of you. You can also imagine that your parents are seated beside you and you're surrounded by every other sentient being. And knowing that your wishes for happiness and your wishes for freedom from suffering are no different than anybody else's. But having come upon the teachings of the Buddha and having faith in them, you decide to lead all beings in the process of going for refuge to the Buddha, his teachings, and his spiritual community. Why? To put an end to suffering and develop all good qualities. And so join me in saying, I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. In response to this wish, think that lights and nectars pour out of the heart of the Buddha and the entourage of bodhisattvas surrounding him. This light and nectar washes over you and over all the beings surrounding you. And the light and nectar remove hindrances and obstacles, becoming an authentic and genuine refugee from suffering and its causes. Then recognizing that all the beings who surround you have not yet put an end to suffering and are afflicted by different obstacles, being emotional or cognitive, generate the wish that all beings possess love and compassion, joy and equanimity. And you decide to establish these four ways of thinking and being yourself. And so you say, may all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is without suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment for friends, hatred for enemies. And in response to this wish of ours, again, powerful lights and nectars flow from the heart of the Buddha and the bodhisattvas, the spiritual entourage, washing over you and over all beings. All obstacles to these four immeasurable thoughts are washed away. And you find that you have this potential to gather the two accumulations of merit and wisdom, and thereby become enlightened for the benefit of all beings. And in the presence of this refuge field, this field for gathering merit, you say, reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all whole ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightenment. Now, acknowledging that all our suffering comes about through misapprehension of reality and clinging to that, we recollect that all phenomena are empty of any intrinsic nature, but do dependently exist. So we take the ordinary view of the body and we transform it, that the body now appears as a wonderful pure land where all beings can participate in Dharma practice. And we offer this land to the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and the spiritual community. And so we say, this ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Mary, four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Atma Mandala Kamnaratayami. So we release ordinary view of the body and clinging to it. And the Buddha accepts our pure offering. And he looks at us and smiles at us with delight. And we look up into his eyes. And looking into his eyes, we find immense kindness, comfort, and acceptance. So we ask the Buddha, please help us stop all wrong thoughts, help all right thoughts develop, and whatever obstacles I might face, whether they be inside, outside, or secret, may they all be removed in dependence upon my devotion upon you. The Guru Buddha, please bless me and all beings surrounding me to understand the four immeasurables, the practices of the mind of enlightenment. and to be fiercely determined to awaken for the benefit of all beings. In response to this wish of ours, this aspiration of ours, a replica of the Buddha leaves his heart and it moves through space and comes to rest above the crown of your head, facing in the same direction you are. The emanation begins to descend, enters the crown of your head, comes down through your body, into your chest, and stops just above your heart. Now the radiance of this emanation begins to expand, filling your body and mind with light. And the light goes out through the pores of your skin and begins to fill the 10 directions of space. And wherever beings abide, they always abide within space. So these beings are all touched and absorbed by the light and utterly transformed into a fully awakened state. Have a feeling of a great accomplishment having taken place. And from the 10 directions of space, the light begins to withdraw. It re-enters your heart. And you can feel your body breathing itself. And you know you're sitting on a chair or a cushion. You feel embodied. And you recognize that your meditation has been one of imagination. But through using the mind in this way, you've imprinted it with the conditions to bring about awakening for the benefit of all beings. Placed upon the mind a potential or seed for enlightenment. So appreciating that, accepting it, you breathe in through your nostrils, you exhale through your mouth, you let your eyes flutter open, and you move your body in whichever way you'd like to, till you feel once again quite comfortable and at ease in your posture. So again, everyone, welcome along to our class. We'll look at what we've covered, and we've only had one other class, so we'll just briefly look at what we did there. So last week we looked at the spread of the Dharma that went from India to Ceylon, China, Asia, Mongolia, Japan, and finally into the West. We acknowledge that there were 4 major lineages of the Mahayana Buddhism in Tibet, that they have their own lineage holders, major texts and teachings. They're all based on the 4 Noble Truths. And then finally, we looked at our own centre and how we were established in 1982 through the kindness of Miffy's mother, meeting Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And I think it's going to be a couple of years, mate, we'll have the 40th year anniversary. No, we've already had that.
43. We've already had that one.
Okay, so we're about 41 years old. And today our topics are, we're going to look at how to listen to the Dharma and some of the benefits of doing so. And we'll look at how we can do this using a simile. And a major portion of the class will be taking up looking at the 12 needs. To draw upon the information for our class, I've relied upon these 8 particular texts. In terms of how to listen to the teachings, Steps on the Path to Enlightenment, that dark maroon book, and the book down below it, Approaching the Buddhist Path. These are the two books that explain the benefits of listening, how to listen, and so forth. The other 6 books primarily about the 12 deeds of the Buddha. So first of all, we begin with the benefits of listening to Dharma. So the first benefit of listening to Dharma is that you actually understand what it is. So tell me what Dharma is. Does anybody remember what the word Dharma means? It has about 10 or 11 different meanings. But when we're talking about here, when we talk about listening to Dharma, the meanings are sort of drawn down into just 1 or 2. Do you recollect what the meaning of Dharma is?
Sue says that which holds you back from suffering.
That's excellent. That's one. That which holds you back from suffering. So in this instance, what is holding us back from suffering is us listening to a person explain what the Dharma is, and we understand it. And then we have to put it into operation. We have to act on it. So just hearing it is not enough. The Dharma will hold you back from suffering, but you have to grab hold of it. You have to hold on to it and apply it. When you do this, a number of different things will happen. The first that will happen is that wrongdoing is turned away from. In other words, the actions that you do that cause yourself suffering and cause others suffering are abandoned. Often gradually. The second wonderful thing about it, what I find is really wonderful, is that the meaningless is turned away from. And finally, if you behave in this way, some of these benefits, if you behave in this way, nirvana is attained. So nirvana here is the absence of suffering and its causes. To bring about that, we have to train in wisdom. So we first train ourselves to listen. Then we train ourselves with how to think about it, how to reflect upon it. And then we train ourselves to become familiar with it. Training in familiarity is what we call meditation. And so we can abandon wrongdoing and its causes through the different methods. But what actually puts an end to suffering and its causes is the wisdom that realizes emptiness. So you need to become sort of know what that wisdom is. We do that again through listening and reading, reflecting upon it, and then putting it into practice. And next let's look, how do we listen, or how should we listen to our Dharma? And this, we discussed this, it's got 2 major topics, 2 ways of doing it. So the first shows you what you have to abandon, and the second one, what you have to adopt. So many of the Buddhist teachings are put like this. You work out what not to do, and then what to do. In fact, Mickey and I, we had a long meeting with my niece and her husband a few days ago. And it was really interesting because we're talking to them. We don't know much about them, but as they're talking to us, they came out of great suffering. Her husband is an Aboriginal man, and he said, I had to become a man when I was 5 years old. And he talked about the brutality, the drunkenness, all these sort of things, the homelessness. He had to be adopted, his family had to be adopted, all these sort of things. And my niece is a Maori girl. She was also adopted. She was brought up with a good family, though. And she was saying how when other Aboriginal people meet her husband and they see how well they're doing, they sort of think, oh, you should help us. You need to, give us things, basically. And his wife won't have a bar of it. And she says, we got to where we are because we stopped drinking, we stopped drugging, we stopped all those things. We abandoned them. And we adopted education and going to work. And we have a happy life. So I heard this story, that's a Buddhist practice. You abandon what does not work, and you adopt what does.
And you get the result.
And you get the results. Yeah? So it's the same here. You can look at all the Buddhist practices and just go, oh, what do I have to abandon here? What do I have to adopt? It's that simple. It just requires us to remember it and the discipline to look at it and go, okay, whatever the practice is, there's something I'm not doing and there's something I am doing. But what are they? We work it out and it becomes simple to apply or simple to at least understand. So let's look at this simile of these three cups. The simile is this showing us how not to listen. So the first part of the simile is the upside down cup. Often it's like the upside down pot. But it's a container for either drinking or eating food out of. And it's upside down. So what happens when your cup's turned upside down and you want some tea or some food?
Thing goes in.
It can't go in, can it? Tea can't go into your cup, your food can't go into your cup. So how might this relate to us in terms of listening? How might the lesson not be going in, for instance?
Distracted.
Yeah, that's right. If our mind is elsewhere, what we're being heard can't go in.
If we don't want to be there.
That's another one that's coming up.
Oh.
So we might not want to be there, but we could be there. We could still hear what's going on. Demi?
Sue said prideful.
Again, that's second cup coming. Good. So if we're listening to a teaching, your mind is elsewhere, then this is like filling an upside down vessel, for the teaching is not entering your mind.
Fall asleep.
Yep, that'll be one. That's right. Can't go in. That's right.
And if we're just not interested in Dharma at all.
Yep, that's right. It's not going to. So you might be here and you're interested in something else. So then, because your focus is somewhere else, you can't absorb what's being taught. So if your mind is sort of shut down or distracted elsewhere, then the teaching won't get in. That's the first thing. Now here comes the second, when the cup is dirty. So when you have a dirty cup, or a dirty plate or something, and then new food or a new drink goes into it, what happens to the new food that goes in it? One at a time. That's right. It usually doesn't, if you ask why, because it gets mixed up with the stuff that was already in there. So how might this relate to our own minds? So now think of your cup as being a vessel, and it's dirty in some way. So what's going to go in is going to be contaminated with it. What might that dirt be?
We don't understand the Dharma very well, or if we do, it's very confused.
I guess we might say confusion then. Miffy?
Being here for ulterior motives.
Being here for ulterior motives, and like Sue said, I think it was pride, was it one Sue said? Yeah. So we're very proud. So you might be sitting there sifting out just what I agree with. But I'm looking for faults. I'm looking for some mistakes the teacher might make. Something I can argue against.
Sometimes people bring preconceived ideas.
This is
Like
another
things
one.
like, the soul or something like that. They'll bring it and then they'll confuse it with the Buddhist teachings.
Yeah, this is also right. So,
Yeah.
Yvette has said that oftentimes what happens, people come in with preconceived ideas and they're not prepared to abandon those. They're quite strong. And what they do is they mix the Dharma in with this new idea. So this is not an uncommon thing to do. A lot of times people come to centres, they just want to be happier people. So what they do is they take their own ideas and then they'll bring in the teaching, they'll take in the ideas of what they hear and they mix them together. And this can lead to some strange occurrences. So this is why it's really important when we start the Dharma teaching that we set our motivation. You know, we say, no, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm listening. And as you'll know, we always go to the motivation of enlightenment. so the cup is clean. Third simile is that of the cracked cup. So what's happening here? So we've got our cup of tea, but it seems to be like pouring out of the bottom, doesn't it? So what happens when that happens?
No tea.
No tea. That's right. You don't have any tea to drink, do you? I mean, it went in, but then it also went out. So you can't nourish yourself with a cup of tea. So how does this relate to us listening?
You might listen to the teachings, but just don't take them in.
Yeah, that's how, well, they go in, but they go out.
Practice.
Yes, that's it is true. You won't practice them if you don't retain them. If they've just gone in and gone out, it's like what practice? I don't remember. So this is what this is giving us. Like we forget them, we don't remember them. They've gone in. We were there. We heard them, and this is not uncommon either. In fact, many times you might go along to a teaching, and afterwards you'll ask each other, "What did they say?" And then perhaps the person next to you will explain, and you didn't hear that. In fact, I remember one time, if you know, and Pearlie went to a teaching, and we all heard 3 different things. But at least it didn't pour out. Stayed in there, we just heard something different, each of us. So this is the way of how we are to abandon, to try not to listen like this. Miffy.
Oh, I just think that the cracked cup is like, instead of active listening, it's just like listening, like just watching TV, but not actually getting involved in it. So then it doesn't stay in your mind.
Yeah, this is what often happens when we're at home, is we watch programs on television or the news or a whole lot of things. And if somebody asks you at the end of the night, so what did you see and what happened? It's just like,
But didn't Tashi Seri refer to it like, don't treat the Dharma like newspaper Dharma, just reading the news and then forget about it.
Yeah, and other things that happen, as many of us, as you'll know, is that so it goes in, and oftentimes it goes in terms of taking notes. And then the notes stay in the pad gets put in your back pocket, and that's as far as it goes. It's forgotten. Debbie.
I go to a Chinese class, and my Chinese teacher refuses to let anyone take photos of her class, because just like what you said, she's adamant that if you do that, you're very lazy. You think you've learned it, but you haven't learned it. She said, I want your eyes on me. I want this interaction, because you will remember that. So
Here, so if later you forget what you've heard, this is like filling a leaky vessel. It's not staying in your mind. So even though the mind is upright and clean, if there's a hole in it, then whatever you pour into it, it drains out the bottom. Now, you should do things that help you to retain the knowledge. Like if writing notes helps, if recording it helps, great. But often we do that, and that's the end of it. But we have recorded, we have written it down, and that's as far as it goes. And then if we're asked a week later about that teaching, there's not much of it we can recall. So you'll probably, if you know anything about memory at all, it said by the time you leave this classroom, if you've taken notes, review them within 90 minutes, within 60 minutes, right? Oftentimes when you take your notes, mind mapping helps. Take the main ideas, don't write everything. Find out about how to take effective notes if you're going to take notes. Then after you've taken them, find out what you do with them. What's the most effective thing I can do with them? And do that. Otherwise you will forget. And again, this is not uncommon. I've known people who've been coming to Dharma teachers for about 30 years. You ask them for things that are quite basic and they don't know, or you're wrong. That's just not an uncommon thing. So what can we do to oppose this thing with the mind that doesn't take anything, or we mix it up with preconceptions that are mistaken or wrong attitudes, or that just it doesn't stay in? What can we do to oppose that? Actually, it's even easier. We just learn how to listen. And the way to listen effectively is described in this next slide. So this first thing to do is perceive yourself to be a patient. So when most people come to a Dharma center, something's wrong in their lives. They're seeking answers. And this is what it said, remind yourself of that. There's a saying like, you have problems. From a Buddhist perspective, we go, yeah, that's right, you do. We all do. This major problem is misperceiving phenomena and thinking that our misperceptions are true and correct. And then we've got a lot of ideas that spring out from that, and then we find ourselves with all sorts of problems. So look, when you do that, you'll find you'll make yourself sick. So think of it as that you're a sick person who has come along to the hospital of the Dharma Centre to try and get some help. And of course, just up the road here is a medical centre. So when I'm feeling unwell, and anybody here, what you normally do is you just go up to the medical centre, don't you? And say, geez, I'm sick. I need to do something about it. So I head up to the centre, and I'm going up there to see a doctor or a medical practitioner. So here we see the Dharma teacher as being the doctor. So we go to the doctor up there, we explain our problem. They listen to what our self-diagnosis is, or the situation that's made us sick. They listen to all of that, and then they come up with some medicine for us. But they sit there and they write out a prescription. So this is the medicine, and here the idea is we come in, we are unwell, we need somebody to help us. This is the teacher. What's going to help is the Dharma. The Dharma is the medicine to make us well. But as you all know, if you don't take the medicine, you don't get well, do you? So in Dharma, it's not just, so just hearing Dharma was not going to cure you. This is just like looking at the labels on the medicine bottles. But yeah, that's the medicine. We'll have to take that medicine. So in terms of Dharma practice, we have to practice it. We have to do it. Most Dharma is just an instruction. If we're the sick person, we have to take that instruction and apply it the best way we can. And I know myself often when I've gone up to the doctors there, that the doctor sort of knows what I'm like. And she could very quickly tell me whether I've been consistently taking my medication. And she always, what is she, what's the term? She encourages me to be consistent in taking the medication and until it's finished. So it's the same with us taking Dharma, right? We have to take the Dharma in the doses that suit us, that have been prescribed, and we take it until we're well. So I've noticed another thing about people who come here. There's not everybody, it's just some people. So some people come here for short-term cures, right? They're unwell, they've tried different things, and these things haven't worked out so well. So we'll try the Buddhist Dharma. So they come along, they get the methods, they apply the methods, and they get well. And they go, great, see you. That's okay too. I mean, it's up to the person. If they're just seeking the happiness of this life, and they're now happier people, well, good. It works. But the Dharma medicine Dharma can take you much, much further than just the happiness of this life. And so as you get better, there can be an inclination to drop off or find other ways of moving on with your life. And that's not a bad thing. This is just looking, I just need to be happy. I'm finding different ways, and these techniques work. This medicine worked for me. That's great. If you want to really go deeper and look at one of the deeper causes of our suffering, then you need to stay a bit longer, and there'll be different doses of medicine you need to take. These are the four major points of the simile. Consider yourself to be a sick person. Consider the teacher of the Dharma to be like a doctor. The Dharma itself to be the medicine, and the cure to take the medicine. These are the four major ones. There are two others, and that is to perceive the Buddha as a holy being. Meaning, just as like when we go up to the doctors, at least me, I don't, because I mean, I don't stand in front of a doctor and use really rough language and, you know, like swear in my language and describe, you're respectful to the doctor, aren't you? Most of us are, I'm sure. You stand there and you appreciate that this person can help you. Please speak kindly, as clear as you can. So you have respect for the doctor. Just here saying this respect for the Buddha. That such a person would come into this world and show you not just how to put an end to temporary problems, but long, long-lasting problems. But look how wonderful that is, that somebody can do that. And there we have this wish that this teaching, this medicine that he's given to us, remains forever, for as long as sentient beings need it. Debbie, you just raise your hand.
With 0.5, is it also like having confidence in
Yeah.
the Buddha? Like the way we would, like if you go to a physician, you would want to have confidence in them. Otherwise, you're going to doubt everything that they're going to say to you.
Yeah.
So you research them first, check them out, and then you have confidence. But then once you've got confidence, you just got to follow the instruction.
Yeah, so it's confidence and respect. Now, like if we were going to the doctor, I mean, we naturally have a confidence. I don't know if it's all that founded, but just, oh, well, they are there. They must be okay, right? Sometimes we find they're not. They don't suit us. So is this simple enough for everybody? You get the simile? Yeah? So something to abandon, the symbols of the cup, something to adopt. Is there anything anybody would like to ask about this or add to it? Miffy.
I was just thinking with the cups, the upside down cup, when you said if you're shut down. So that's true. It's like if you've got burnout or if you're emotionally shut down in the middle of a trauma, often what people will say, it just can't go in.
That's right.
You're on tilt kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah.
And
Or if you're quite seriously depressed and yet your parents or some kind person not come along to the Dharma Centre, I mean, it's hard to hear what's being directed at you. Yeah. Okay, let's do a short meditation on what we've covered. Now, please just get comfortable in your seat. Allow your body and your mind to be present. And you can take a few deep breaths. Take, 3 deep breaths. Take 1 deep. Exhale. Now another. And 1 more. Just the mind become clear and the body to be relaxed. And bring your awareness to your own intention for learning and practicing Dharma. So remember the first fault. It's an upside down cup that represents a closed mind that prevents the Dharma from entering. Now reflect upon the second fault. This is dirty cup. What's that mean? In brief, is to listen with wrong motivations that taint the teachings. So take a moment or two to recognize any tendencies within yourself to approach the Dharma with closed-mindedness or impure intentions. And then imagine your mind as a clean, upright vessel. It's ready to receive the precious nectar of the Dharma. So how might you cultivate a receptivity that allows teachings to penetrate deeply? And then we have the third fault, which is quickly forgetting what you've learned without integration. So imagine yourself as a patient seeking spiritual healing through the Dharma. Imagine your teacher to be a compassionate doctor offering wise prescriptions. And recognize the Dharma teachings as potent medicine for ignorance and suffering. And consider how diligent practice acts as taking the medicine to heal yourself. And reflect upon the Buddha as the source of these teachings with reverence and gratitude. And then aspire to approach future Dharma teachings with an open, pure, and retentive mind. And then return your awareness to these surroundings. And carry the intention to be an excellent vessel for the Dharma. Let your eyes flutter open now if they're closed. Bring your awareness into the room. Thinking, I can be an excellent vessel for Dharma. Exhale, and we'll get ready now for the next portion of the teaching. So now we're going to talk about Buddha and the 12 deeds. So the first thing about this is that it is not an historical story, although the Theravada tradition focus on the historical aspects of this teaching. In fact, it's a hagiography. And this hagiography is presented through three perspectives. But does anybody here know what a hagiography is? Yeah. Well, Stephen's shaking his head. He's going, yep, I know. So Stephen, what's the hagiography?
It's a very positive biography. It's not critical about person.
Yeah, so this is correct, and it's a spiritual biography. It's actually a teaching aid. The Buddhist hagiography in general is that the teachings of the Dharma outrank what we would call attention to in history. So in the minds of hagiographers, the needs of preaching come before concerns over history. That a hagiography is a spiritual or religious biography. It can be read as an ideological document reflecting the ideas of the community which put their hagiography together. And this hagiography demonstrates very pointedly the central vision of Buddhism, which is the gap between the way things appear to be and the way things really are. Now, I've got down here, so it's got, there are three perspectives. So the three perspectives are the perspective of the Theravada tradition. So you've probably all heard of this tradition practiced mostly in Southeast Asia. Then there's the Mahayana tradition, and finally, as an offshoot of the Mahayana, the Vajrayana. So this story can be told through these three lenses. And in the Pali tradition, they don't have 12 deeds, they have 8. So as we go through, I'll show you where the Pali or Theravada tradition does not have that particular aspect, they leave it alone. So the first deed of the Buddha is the descent from Tushita, Pure Land. So here, the Theravada or Pali tradition and the Mahayana, it's the same. But they both have a similar presentation, which is that the Buddha to be descends from Tushita heaven, where he's been teaching the gods, to here, to the earth, to take his final rebirth. So what's it demonstrating? It demonstrates the Buddha's willingness to leave behind a heavenly realm to help beings in the human world. So it's really demonstrating compassion. So it's symbolizing the emanation of an enlightened mind into the world of samsara. So this doesn't mean that the Buddha's mind, the enlightened mind, becomes samsara. It means that having this enlightened mind and seeing the sufferings of others that don't have it, I will help. And this is what this symbolizes, this coming down from heaven down to earth. It's a trajectory of compassion.
I have a question about the hagiography. Is it sort of saying that this is truth? It may not be true, but it's truth. It may not be true and that happened A, B, C, D, like historically, but it's truth.
Like the letter of the law or the spirit of the law kind of thing.
There was the spirit of the law there, yeah. So this is like the Mahayana and the Hinayana or Pali tradition, Theravada tradition. This is the same, right? They all agree here. Buddha came down from this, and this is what it means. This is what it represents. In Higher Sloga Tantra, it represents the descent of subtle consciousness from the crown chakra. For anybody. So when we go through the process of dying, this is what happens. One consciousness comes down like this, the other consciousness comes up from below, and they meet in the middle. Okay, so it says, you long bound yourself to compassion in order to free all those in the world who were bound by defilements. So this is the agreement of the, like I said, the Theravada and the Mahayana traditions. This is where they agree. This is what it basically means. In one of the Guru Yogas, it says, to you who out of compassion descended from Tushita heaven to this world, who benefit sentient beings, I pay homage. The second deed. So is anybody here not familiar with these deeds at all? Doesn't know anything about it? Okay, so I'll say a little bit about it. But so the story goes that the Queen, Mahadeva, was asleep in her bed and she had this dream. And in the dream, a white elephant with 6 tusks entered her side, came in through her side. and enters the womb of Mahadevi. So the Buddha to be enters Queen Maya's womb, appearing in her dream as a white elephant. The event signifies the auspicious nature of the Buddha's birth and the purity of his conception. In the Mahayana, it's the same, they both agree there. But in tantric terms, this symbolizes the union of method and wisdom. Tantric terms, it represents the merging of bliss and emptiness.
And the 6 tusks representing the 6 perfections.
Yep, 6 tusks represent the 6 possessions. So in the Vajrayana, the emphasis is really on the symbolic meaning of these things. Huge, major influence there. Mahayana it's partially that too. In Pali, it's more of this historical bent, like this really happens legitimately.
The other like bridge between the two.
Yeah, you could say that because it ties it together. The bridge being compassion, this heightened, greater, that's greater compassion. Then we have, so here we have the quote, "You rose up for the welfare of all beings lost in the beginningless and fearful straits of becoming." So this hymn here, Mattrasitta's hymn, Mattrasitta was not originally a Buddhist. He was what was the major thing going on that time? Yeah, the Hindu. He was a Hindu poet, philosopher. And against sort of Buddhism. But then when he met up with some Buddhist monks and through debate and so forth, and over time, he went, oh my gosh, I've been completely mistaken. And so he composed this great hymn to the Buddha. And so some of the quotes I've taken from that hymn. This is so in tantric terms, this presents the merging of bliss and emptiness. In his third, birth in Lumbini, and Buddha takes 7 steps in the lion's roar. So as in the story, so the queen is going back to the palace, I think, so she can give birth to her child. But she realizes she's not going to make it. And the place where she realizes that's called the Lumbini Grove. And it said that the trees have lowered their branches so she could reach up, and she held onto the branch and gave birth to the Buddha standing up. And the Buddha came out through her side. That's just a miraculous birth. Now, this is not unusual in terms of spiritual hagiographies. If you just look at Christianity, Christ was born a virgin birth. So these things have symbolic meaning. The miraculous birth emphasizes the Buddha's extraordinary nature from the very beginning. Especially he takes these 7 steps, like he's born, there's no, I don't know what you might call that, when babies are born. There's no things after birth, he's born clean, he comes straight out, he just starts walking. He takes these 7 steps and says, this is the last birth I'll ever have. I'm going to be victorious in this life. So, again, Theravada and Mahayana are very similar, are similar. So, and this taking birth represents the manifestation of enlightened activity in the world. But in Highest Yoga Tantra, it symbolized the arising of the illusory body. This is what he said, we took those 7 steps. This is my last birth. Now there is no renewed existence for me. So you can see so I remember one of the Buddhist nuns from Chenrezig Institute, there was a young man in jail and he wanted to know about the Buddha's life story. And so she sent him one of those books. So it's a lovely book to read, but he read it and thought you should take it like literally. And of course, he just went, and so he just had to drop his faith in it. I thought, man, that's this dangerous thing when you just give stuff across like this and you go, this is like believing in the Virgin Mary, literally. right? Believing in these miraculous things as literal statements. Of course, it's going to, you can go, no, can't do that. So you got to look at it a different way. And unfortunately, none didn't explain that to him. You'll see in the books.
It's kind of like magical realism, where it makes a huge emotional sense, but it's not necessarily historically.
Yeah, accurate. Yeah,
Accurate.
so don't take it on a historical level or that. Yeah. So then the fourth speed, it says he becomes skilled in the arts, playing the sports of youth in Kapalavastu. So Kapalavastu is the sort of centre where the palace was. Now, this is not mentioned in the Pali or the Theravada tradition. The last three deeds were, this one is not. So in the Mahayana, he becomes skilled in the various arts. The young prince Siddhartha demonstrates mastery in numerous fields of study and athletic pursuits. Now, this deed shows the Buddha's worldly accomplishments and intellectual capacity. The becoming skilled in the various arts symbolizes the perfection of all qualities. But in tantric practice, this represents mastery over the subtle energies and channels. The quote from the hymn is, "Beloved for your gentleness and honored for your many virtues." So if you read this hagiography, you'll see there's lots of great stories here. There's a story where his brother shoots the swan, and he comes to claim the swan, and Buddha takes the swan, and they have to go to the king and go, who does the swan belong to? And there's this debate, and they give it to young Siddhartha. He does it. With this competition here to marry, they introduced him to his future wife. So she's so beautiful, and there's all these people, princes all over the nation come to win her hand. So they've got to go, okay, who's the best archer? Who's the best horse rider? Who's the best wrestler? So the Buddha, as a young Prince Siddhartha, wins all these competitions.
So in other words, he wasn't just like meek and fragile and skeletal,
No.
hear about hermits or something.
Nope. Number 5, taking charge of the kingdom and keeping a harem. So again, no deed is mentioned in the Pali Theravada tradition about this. This is not one of their deeds. Remember, they've only got the first 3 so far. They've got 5 more to go. But these 2 are not in it. So here it says, delighted in the company of the royal consorts. The prince enjoys palace life and marries Princess Yashodhara. So this phase represents the Buddha's experience of worldly pleasures before his renunciation. So delighting in the company of the royal consorts represents the enjoyment of relative truth. But in highest yoga tantra, this symbolizes the union of bliss and emptiness in the sexual yoga practices of highest yoga tantra. And the quote is, "She that was ours henceforth is only yours. Be good to her, who has her life in you." So this is taken from a quote called Light of Asia. It was written actually by an English author. Now, I'm going to pause here. What else do you find interesting about this? Is there anything that resonates with you about this? Anything jump out?
Related.
Yeah, in what way? How is it relatable?
It's quite biblical, that's how it seems to me.
Okay, biblical. Anything else? Isn't it very much like I thought it was just like my own life, like it's like an ordinary life?
Which bits are ordinary?
Well, yeah.
Was Buddha actually a person, a human being, and this is another story about him, or is he himself part of the.
There's two takes on that. So in general, they'd say yes. At one stage, there was a person who had the name Buddha. Before that, he had another name called Siddhartha. But when he attained this enlightenment, then he was given the name Buddha. Yeah, so there's a lot of evidence that such a person did live, was at one stage as a human being on planet. Yeah. Now, so this is, so of course, like, so when I say this, like, okay, so we've got to go back into because the nature of mind, right? So the mind, when it was not in this body, was somewhere in some other body, wasn't it? So that's the first thing, leaving Toshida. Your mind was somewhere else, in the home of some other body. That body passed away. Your parents had sex. They conceived you. So your mother became pregnant. Second deed. Then, of course, you were born. So your mother gave birth to you. That's the third deed. The fourth deed is, you know, you grow up as a kid. You play games. You go to school. You play sports, just as people do nowadays, right? And then taking charge of the harems, yeah, you start meeting girls or girls meet boys, right? And now you start playing the field, so to speak. So look at this. That's how I look at it. Wow, this is just like ordinary life, except it's not. It's a little step up from that, but it's been sort of symbolized very heavily.
Yeah, it's kind of anchored in an ordinary trajectory, but told in this extraordinary way.
Yeah, which is like this magical realism you're speaking of. Anyway, that's what I found interesting about it. Yeah. Because I just sort of like going backwards, you go, oh, look at what all the people do when you're a kid, you go, everybody gets, especially in Australia, sports. Sports is a big deal, right? And then you sort of growing up and you become interested in girls, well, that's the harem part.
Yeah, the football wives.
Yeah, that's right. And if you go back before that, you go, well, you were born. So you go, yep, I was. So that's this part here. And where'd you come from before that? Because you're not, your mind is not something physical. Some sort of trajectory of consciousness there. Anyway, that's just my take on it. So let's do a short meditation on this. Again, get comfortable in the seat. Maybe just take one deep breath in this time and exhale it. Yeah. Let everything settle. Let the mind become clear. Then bring your awareness to this concept of the 12 deeds of the Buddha. So these deeds are a spiritual biography, and they reflect core Buddhist ideas. They illustrate the gap between appearance and reality, a central Buddhist tenet. So how might these deeds mirror your own spiritual journey? Like a tapestry of wisdom and compassion, the 12 deeds illustrate the path to enlightenment. Can you see yourself within the tapestry? Each thread representing your steps towards awakening. The deeds highlight the Buddha's human and extraordinary qualities, making enlightenment seem attainable. They demonstrate key principles like compassion, renunciation, and wisdom. So the deeds show that even the Buddha faced challenges, which encourages our perseverance. They serve as points for contemplation on reality and our place within it. Now, Buddhist traditions interpret these deeds variously, from historical accounts to symbolic representations. They bridge the historical Buddha and spiritual ideal. They offer a framework for enlightenment. Just breathing a little bit more deeply now. Exhaling and letting your eyes flutter open. And just try to carry insights you've gained from the contemplation into the rest of the day. Now, I stopped on those 5 deeds for a particular reason. As you know, there are 12. So these are like I said, when I look at my own life, I've gone through all of that. Now something happens in the 6th deed. But it's the same for all of you, I'm sure. Something happens there. So now the trajectory is different. You're no longer, you've had your feet of ordinary life, ordinary pleasures. You found, oh, this is what it's like. In the 6th deed, a sense of discontent arises. Yeah? So this discontent arises because the Buddha experiences these 4 sights. So he sees an aging person, a sick person, and a dead person. And then he sees a renunciate monk walking around serene. And he realizes himself, is this the outcome of my life? That even though I have the wealth of the palace and all these beautiful women, these concubines, I'm married, I have a son, I've got all the wealth I need. But I must grow old. I will get sick and I will die. What's the point of it? So these questions arise when he sees these sights. So he becomes disillusioned with this life that he has. Because when he sees that monk, he says, perhaps there's a way out. Perhaps there's an unproduced. All these things are produced. Perhaps there's another way. He sees the countenance of the monk serene, at ease, in the face of sickness, aging, and death, and decides to leave the palace. So the Prince Siddhartha, he renounces his royal life and leaves the palace to seek enlightenment, or at that time it's called liberation. So this deed illustrates the importance of renunciation and the pursuit of spiritual truth over worldly comforts. So in the Mahayana and Pali, they're the same here. So they've got the 4th deed in terms of the Pali tradition. In Yoga Tantra, it's representing renouncing ordinary appearances and ideas, ordinary appearances and conceptions. If anyone's had tantric initiations with knows about that, you're meant to see the world from quite a different perspective, what they call a pure view. This, of course, took place when the Buddha was 29 years old. From this text, The Light of Asia, it's a supreme sage. It is time for you to leave your home. And from the Guru Puja, it says, to you who renounced your royal life and worldly pleasures at the age of 29, to seek the path to enlightenment for the benefit of all, I pay homage. As you know, so he leaves the palace. Really interesting stories too, like his horse dies of heartbreak. You know, his friend Chandra goes with him. He's got to cut all his hair off, and he gives Chandra all his good clothes and sort of things. He picks up the clothes from a charnel ground, wears them. And at the time, so one of the books I really liked about this was the book written by an ex-Christian nun. She was a really good history of the Buddha. And yeah, what's the point here? But in it, she sort of shows what? I guess this process of renunciation, and it was not unusual at the time. At that time in India, there was a big change in India at the time, and she calls this the axial age. So not only in India, Greece also. There's a movement across the world of people also going to self-discovery. And so what they had is you had these people called shramanas, which were basically another name for the forest dwellers. So people were leaving their jobs, leaving their occupations, and becoming wanderers, ascetics, trying to work out who I am, how do I get past suffering and its causes. And the Buddha was just one of these people.
Wasn't it like lots of young men did
Yeah.
that instead of like a gap year almost, you know?
Yeah, it was just a sense of disillusionment going across cultures, thinking that is this war and battle and riches and death? What's that about?
They still sort of do that in the Pali tradition. Everyone becomes a nun by month for a year.
Yeah, this is right. Yeah. Okay, so of course in these events the next deed is called when he engages in the austerities. So there's no deed mentioned in the Pali tradition about this one. But in the Mahayana tradition, it means he practices austerities for 6 years. So the Buddha to me engages in extreme ascetic practices before ultimately abandoning them. And this demonstrates the middle way between indulgence and severe austerities. In Higher Sober Tantra, it symbolizes the practice of inner heat or tumo and the other advanced practices. And from Matrasita's hymn, you ate poor food, sometimes you went hungry. You walked rough paths and slept on the ground, trampled hard by the hooves of cattle. So when you read this section, it's tremendous, like his description of what his body felt like. So it said he could get his finger, push on his belly button, feel his spine. He was that thin, eating like a grain of rice a day. And he described the noise in his head, like his body is sort of all the energies and sort of stuff that really going on. It's like thunder in his head, and it gets really severe, and he's sort of wondering, is this really the way I should keep going? And like I said, let's see, for 6 years there was becoming more and more extreme, trying to find some end to the suffering. But then when he finds out, of course, that he remembers something that happened when he was a child, when he watched this what do you call it, like a farming ceremony. He was sitting underneath an apple tree and he just sort of relaxes his board and pleasure arose. And so then he started wondering, is pleasure such a bad thing? Because, so he works out, actually it's not pleasure itself, it's the grasping and the clinging that's the problem. So he gives this up. He says, perhaps pleasure, like I said, it's not wrong to feel pleasure. So off he goes to the tree in Bodh Gaya. Again, no deed is mentioned in the Pali or the Theravada tradition. So he proceeds to the Bodhi tree, called the place of enlightenment, showing his determination to attain awakening. So this symbolizes the unshakable determination to achieve enlightenment. In Tantra, this represents entering the deepest meditative absorption. So you see, you yourself make the effort for your salvation. The Buddhas are only teachers who can show you how to achieve it.
Is that talking to us or talking
to us.
To Siddhartha?
No, to us.
To us.
To us. Just like you say, you've got to do it yourself. You'll have to sit down and do this thing if you wish to become enlightened. But I want to approach from the middle way perspective. Austerity doesn't work. So there's that lovely story where when he gives up the austerities, he meets a young girl looking after the cows, Sujata, who offers him this little plate of porridge. And he eats it and he gets all strength back and he goes, right, and heads off towards Varanasi and towards the tree.
So she's being credited with like the one who saved the Buddha's life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so in you see the Buddhist text, a couple of things have a great deal of symbolic value, women and trees. Then he gets to the tree, he sits down, he starts to meditate, and just like we will discover, the hosts of Maras or the hosts of demons appear. So this is called overcoming Mara. Again, in the Pali and the Mahayana tradition, they both agree with this in this step, right? So the Buddha defeats Mara and his forces. And this symbolizes the conquest of inner defilements and temptations. This is very much like Christ going into the desert, right? And the devil tempts him and meets when they have this conversation. What really means symbolically is you're meeting your deepest inner obstructions.
That's not fun.
No. So this deed encourages practitioners to face and overcome their own inner obstacles. In highest yoga tantra, this symbolizes overcoming the conceptual and the emotional obscurations, the two obscurations, cognitive and emotional obscurations.
So they're like the instincts, aren't they? Those.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you get down there, there's this deep, it's instinctual. Yeah. He becomes fully enlightened. Here we go. You have declared the destruction of the defilements. You have exposed Mara's delusions. You have taught the evils of samsara. You have revealed the place without fear. No, it's nirvana, personal liberation. Now, when he becomes fully enlightened, again, this is in the Pali and the Mahayana tradition. So this central event in the Buddha's life serves as an inspiration for all practitioners, showing us that awakening is possible. In Tantra, this symbolizes the realization of the union of bliss and emptiness. Oops. Oops, sorry. It says, this Dharma that I've attained is profound, hard to see and hard to understand. So when you read this, it's amazing. He gets this down, he says, look, I don't know if I can explain this to anybody else. In fact, I don't think I can at all. So I'm just going to stay here in the forest and merge myself in this bliss and emptiness. And then said that the gods appear to him and say, no, look, there are some sentient beings whose minds are completely deluded. They'll be able to understand some portion of what you say. And as you know, when he thinks of who could I teach, he thinks, perhaps the last people who taught me. And then he looks, he says, no, they've passed away. And then he goes, so who could I teach? Who could I explain this to? And he realized, the 5 people that I was sitting with. And the 5 other ascetics he spent all the time with. So I'll go and explain to them what I've discovered. So one of the interesting things that happens as the Buddha goes to turn this wheel of Dharma, on the way to find these 5 ascetics to teach them, he meets another traveler. And actually, it said the 4 Noble Truths. When he talks to the 5 previous ascetics, he explains to them the 4 Noble Truths, right? Seen as the first teaching of the Buddha. But in fact, he gave another teaching before that. This very simple line, and really it's really fun to read. So he's on his way, and he comes across a traveler who's a merchant. And the merchant is so struck by the appearance of the Buddha. And he goes like, who are you? Who are you? Like, what are you? Are you a human? Are you a god? Are you some what? He goes, Shakespeare says, I am awake. So this guy looks at him and goes like, we'll see ya. So it's like the sleep going, okay, maybe that's not the way to teach. So, but of course, by the time it gets to the 5 or 6, he doesn't say that, right? But they've got the same idea. They go, oh, that's the guy who gave up on the practices, right? Let's just pay no attention to him. But as it becomes clearer and clearer, they see, yes, it was the person who knew as Siddhartha, but he's changed. And they can't help but stand up. And, they decide we're not going to pay any attention. But when he appears, it's like, this is a different person. So they're sort of driven up to their feet and pay their respects to him. And so then he tells them what he's discovered. And this is where he turns the wheel of Dharma by teaching the Four Noble Truths. So turning the wheel of Dharma represents teaching at various levels. Because if you look at the Four Noble Truths, they're explained 3 times, and they can be understood from a number of different viewpoints. You can understand it from the Vaibhashika, the Sautrantika, the mind only, and the middle way. 4 different explanations of this. And just as I'm explaining to turning the Ds, 3 ways. So nothing is like one way. I love this, it depends. Yeah. So the teaching is taught depend upon the student. Buddha doesn't just go, well, like most of us, well, here it is, it's all there, and overwhelming. So what's suitable to teach this person? In fact, I was just reading the other day where a person was saying, I can't practice Dharma because I don't have the time to meditate and do all these things. And the teacher said to him, you can be kind. That's right. That's a teaching of the Buddha, to be kind. And we can all be kind. So we might not be able to meditate and so forth and realize the emptiness and all those things, but we can still practice the teachings of the Buddha. He turns this wheel of Dharma. In Yoga Tantra, this symbolized transmitting both the outer and the secret teachings. So the secret teachings, of course, are Yoga Tantra teachings and also teachings of what they call bare presence. So these are not just blah, 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 talked about. And even when you go to a tantric initiation, and they explain the sadhana to you and explain what you're doing, that's just the surface level. In fact, I think it's 6 levels of meaning with you in Tantra, Yoga Tantra?
I said it's 32.
32 different meanings as you go down through. Because remember, there isn't anything that has any intrinsic nature. Nothing has any intrinsic meaning. It's all dependent. But basically, he turns the wheel of Dharma in normal parlance, it's the Four Noble Truths. But again, it's interesting to say that when he taught the Four Noble Truths from a Mahayana perspective, at the very same time, he was teaching the Heart Sutra. Okay? Different perspectives. So here, freedom, the joy of enlightenment, praiseworthy virtues and peace. These 4 benefits are all gained from your teaching. I think he taught for like 40 years. And he passes away, I think, around at the age of 80. So again, this deed is in the Pali and the Mahayana tradition. This event underscores impermanence of all phenomena and the goal of liberation. But in Tantra, it symbolizes the dissolution of the illusory body into clear light. Again, amazing. All component things in the world are changeable. They are not lasting. Work hard to gain your own salvation.
I've heard like some of the school kids say, well, how can a Buddha die?
Mhm.
Like, you know, it was so great, then how come he died?
Yeah. So you have to explain that on the level of, the ordinary level. Or you might even, if you're bright enough, you might be able to explain on the different levels. So, well, there's this explanation, and this is more of the historical thing. And of course, the Buddha was seen as a person. In the Pali tradition, Buddha is seen as a person. In the Mahayana tradition, Buddha is seen as mind, awakened mind. In Tantra, it's just a continuation of a blissful and empty mind. In fact, it seems like the three bodies of the Buddha. So again, different explanations, different perspectives. But this is always, I find this really interesting, and it's always useful to us to bear in mind that if it exists, it does so dependently. It depends on something else. So when you find yourself clinging to an opinion or an idea, remember that's only one idea about it. It doesn't have to, it might not be true at all, or it might be just true from your perspective. There are other aspects of truth. But that'll have to stop clinging to conceptions. Conceptions can be true or false, but you always have to remember they're relative truth. So again, let's do a final meditation then. Again, you're sitting comfortably in your seat. You're breathing normally and naturally. I want you to imagine feeling the immense love and compassion that motivated the selfless descent from Tushita heaven. It's like a rich person going into the slums, giving away their wealth to the poor. Then reflect on the purity and the auspiciousness of us entering the womb. And this represents the union of method and wisdom. Imagine the Buddha being born in the Lumbini Grove, emerges from his mother's right side. He takes those 7 steps. Then consider the importance of developing a wide range of skills and qualities in your own life. And then upon the role of pleasure and enjoyment in your life. Consider the importance of letting go of attachments in your own spiritual journey. And ponder the importance of balance in the middle way in your own spiritual practice. Imagine the strength and focus required to overcome obstacles on your own spiritual path. And then reflect on the potential for enlightenment which is within you. And consider the importance of sharing wisdom and guiding others on their spiritual paths. And recollect the impermanence of life and the legacy of the Buddha's teachings. As you go about your day, you can carry the lessons of the Buddha's life with you. Strive to embody compassion and wisdom and balance. And dedicate your actions. And when you're ready, just gently open your eyes. You're feeling inspired and guided by the Buddha's journey. Now here we have 12 stamps, and they come from Bhutan. They were released in 2014, and of course they are the 12 deeds of the Buddha. And the series itself demonstrates Bhutan's cultural connection to Buddhism and its efforts to commemorate important religious concepts through stamps.
Postal service.
Yeah. And so I've left this. So what's our takeaway today? Well, you do know how to listen, but you know the wrong way to listen, and you know what you can do to change that. That you just adopt the 6 skillful methods. We looked at the 12 deeds. You know they are a hagiography, which means a spiritual or religious biography. They're not a literal truth, historical truth. And between now and next week, there is material online about the 12 deeds if you want to dig into it a bit more deeper. But try to bear in mind this idea of the 3 cups. You know, so most people forget this. It's like when you come and just sort of walk in. But the idea is to think, well, actually, I'm not as well as I could be. The afflictions still have control over me. Therefore, I'm sort of sick. The afflictions can make me sick. My own disturbing emotions incapacitate me. And so I come to the Dharma Centre to learn how to overcome those incapacities. I want to be fit and well. I want to be mentally healthy. I want to live a meaningful life. So I need to know how to do that. That's the Dharma. And I need to actually do it. So I'll listen to these methods. I've got to take something away from it. Something I can do. Doesn't have to be everything, but something. Make it meaningful for yourself. So think about these 3 cups and the 6 ways to listen. Try to integrate them. And you have this verse 2 of this foundation of all good qualities. Again, try to memorize it. You might not be able to, but remember there's only 4 lines there. If you do 1 line a day, at the end of the week, you've got it. It's not hard. It's just whether you want to do it or not, whether you see the benefit of doing it. Because next week, we're going to be looking at verses 1 and 2. And if you've already got them somewhere in your head and in your mind, I could perhaps ask you something. Maybe I'll say, would you like to recite the first couple of lines of the first verse? And we'll see how you go, or not. And then I'll explain to you about these 3 capacities that one has as they engage with the path. Yeah.
Could you say again slowly what the FA
Q stands for Foundation of All Good Qualities. Okay, any final questions? Anything anybody would like to finally ask? Is there anything coming from online, Debbie?
Lots of thank yous.
Okay, lots of thank yous. Methods.
Just to say that on Geshe Zopa's pilgrimage, we went to Lam Rim, and it's an amazing place. So it's it's an archaeological dig.
Yeah.
In one part, and then there's the actual ponds that have been kind of preserved where Buddha's mother gave birth, and that's where everybody sits outside. It's like in a field and just does Buddhist chanting or meditation. It's got this incredible feel to it, this vibe. And then one of the trees, which everyone thinks is the one that
she held on to.
But then Geshe Zopa says that's actually not the tree, it's this one over here, so we all went over to that one and stayed over that. So there's the inside village as well, it's fantastic being there, and when you actually enter Lumbini, you know, it's this huge, massive field, but everybody takes their shoes off. So you're walking through the fields in your socks, which is really nice. And then all around, it was made a United Nations heritage site. And so there are temples from every single Buddhist tradition. So there's something almost 40 now. And so each one, it's like going into a cathedral of that particular type of Buddhism and that particular art. And each one's just exquisite, drop dead gorgeous and completely different. So you get this feel of the huge array of Buddhist teaching and culture.
Fantastic.
Looked up and said,
X marks the spot.